And Will, you said 46, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Attorney General.
Yep, yep. All right, let me just find my file here, yeah. Mike, can you silence your cell phone just so it doesn't ring, because we're filming this, it's always bad to have it ring. We're gonna start by asking each of you guys to introduce yourself, mention your party affiliation, the office that you're running for, well, whoever goes first can say all that, and then just give us a minute or two of bio, where you grew up, what you do for a living. Then we'll talk about issues in the race and so on. So, you ready, Brian?
The only thing I would ask, I'm a bit hard of hearing, so.
Okay.
Speak loud.
We'll bring it up.
Are you okay if I film this as long as I don't preempt you guys?
You can record it. We don't want you to film it.
Okay, audio only.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let me get that going. Okay.
Great. Okay, let's get started. Will, why don't you start us off, please?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Will Lathrop. I'm the Attorney General of Oregon. I'm running as a Republican. I'm originally from a little town called Joseph, Oregon, in Wallowa County, which
Beautiful town.
Beautiful town. That'll always be my home. But I moved to the Willamette Valley to go to law school at Willamette University. My first law job out of law school was I was a prosecutor in McMinnville, so Yamhill County. I was recruited away to Marion County to join their Special Victims Unit and was a child sex abuse prosecutor for a number of years. Also handled cases
In what county?
in Marion County,
In
so
Marion County.
Salem. Also handled cases of adult sexual assault, homicide, human trafficking, domestic violence, but my major focus was on protecting children from violence. And then I was recruited to go to an organization called the National District Attorneys Association in the Washington, D.C. area, where I served for a short period of time. Then I went overseas.
What did you do for that?
Yeah, so National District Attorneys Association would do capacity building for law enforcement across the country, police, child abuse assessment centers, prosecutors, and did a lot of research and writing. What's that?
Like training?
Yeah, there'd be training,
Put on events?
hotlines.
And what was the funding? Where did the funding come from?
At the time, I believe most of the funding was coming from the U.S. Department of Justice. It was kind of a subsidiary of that. But I also think that part of the funding came from the district attorney's offices across the nation.
Gotcha. So you moved to D.C.?
Yeah, Alexandria, yeah.
For how
town.
long?
We were there for just a little under a year, my wife and I were.
And how was that, and why did it only last a year?
Well, you know, one thing, my wife and I didn't really love living in Washington, D.C. We liked Oregon a lot better.
Yeah.
She was working at George Washington University, and at the time, I was feeling I was missing the front lines of victim protection, and so I started to look for places to volunteer on my spare time, and I ran into an organization called IJM, which is the world's largest anti-human trafficking organization, and they started talking to me about my prosecutorial and some of my leadership experience, and one thing led to another, and they asked me to move to Uganda to lead a multinational team. So we'd planned to be in DC for several years, but that opportunity came up, and we felt really like, I joke to say that Washington, D.C. was so unpleasant for us that northern Uganda was sounding pretty nice at that time.
So what exactly did you do in Uganda?
Yeah, so I led a multinational team, and we partnered with the Ugandan government. They had this 21-year civil war there, and they had militants and a lot of lawlessness in the north, and so they would come and push these widows and orphans off their land using all kinds of violence, and they really condemned them to starvation. So we would go into the bush, we'd find these women and children, we'd get them legal title to their land, and then we'd go after and prosecute the violent land raiders in court. And so I was there for a couple years.
How does that work? I mean, you're not licensed to practice law in Uganda, or you were given some special dispensation to do so?
No, so the most of the team I was with was Ugandan, so I would say about.
So they were doing the.
Yeah, so we hired Ugandan lawyers, and in Uganda we actually had prosecutorial authority. Our office did.
Right.
So I was executive leader. I wasn't doing any of the frontline leading. Some of the stuff I would do would be hands-on training, like training judges, training police, training prosecutors. But most of the time I was just doing executive leadership there. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So,
Just one question, if I can. You said you joined the Special Victims Unit this is in Marion County?
Yeah.
How big is that unit?
I don't know what it is now, but I think there were six attorneys.
And what are those 6 lawyers, what are you prosecuting?
My major focus was child sex abuse. So Jessica's Law cases where kids were raped or sodomized under the age of 12.
Gotcha.
Most of the victims I had were prepubescent, but I also prosecuted adult sexual assault, homicide,
Okay.
domestic violence.
I have a random trivia question to ask you that I remember reading somewhere
Yeah.
that the highest recidivism rate are amongst pedophiles
Yes,
and
sir.
people who write bad checks.
I don't know about the second thing.
Those are the two. Is there any truth to any of that?
I think what the science when I was prosecuting, now it's been 10 years since I was doing that, but the science then was the recidivism rate was about 97% for pedophiles after treatment. So yes, it is a very difficult thing to treat. And that's why we have such harsh penalties, because it's really removing them from the opportunity to hurt children.
So just to finish your bio, you were in Africa for how long?
2 years in Uganda, and then I was moved to West Africa to kind of lead a larger operation. So in West Africa, I was living in Ghana for 5 years, and we were partnering with the U.S. State Department, the UNICEF, and the Ghana government to identify child trafficking victims and then rescue them and then prosecute the traffickers in court. So it was a similar thing, just a larger operation, a larger scale problem.
Still with IJM?
Still with IJM. And the State Department also gave us some money. It wasn't our main thing, but they gave us some side money to go into Middle Eastern countries and rescue West African women who had been trafficked there for labor or sex. So we probably brought it back up. In my time there, I would say 100 to 120 women, but it was kind of a side project. Our major focus was on children.
How long have you been back in Oregon?
15 months, maybe 16.
What are you doing now? Doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mike, tell us about yourself.
Sure. So I've lived in Oregon most of my life, and even at a young age, 11 years old, doing door-to-door sales, 12 years old. I had my first checking account. I don't know that that'd be allowed these days, but it kind of gives you a glimpse into, what I'm a business person. So most of my career I've been either starting out as management, project manager, or operations manager.
Where'd you grow up?
I'm sorry?
You said you grew up in Oregon, but where?
Where?
Yeah.
In Oregon, most of it.
Where?
Northern Cal. Well, a little bit in Northern California, and mainly in Marion County, Oregon.
Where'd you go to high school?
Where did I go to high school? In Chico, California.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
In college?
In California and some in Salem also. So, I wasn't looking for a degree because of my nature of my work, and so I just cherry-picked the classes that I felt were most applicable to me and my entrepreneurial endeavors, such as advertising, accounting, and a little bit of law also.
So I'm sorry, did you get a degree?
No, I didn't. I wasn't pursuing a degree.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you went into business.
Yeah, well, but right out of high school, I went in the military. So I served in the Air Force honorably for 4 years.
Okay.
And then got out of the Air Force, and I started a janitorial business, commercial cleaning mostly,
In Salem?
in California.
In California, okay.
Yeah. So, we had clients such as Target, Kmart, Walmart, things like that.
Right.
Mostly commercial cleaning. And early 90s, I want to say about 93, I moved to Salem area. Wanted to get out of California.
Uh-huh.
And so other than that, presently I'm a CEO of a durable medical equipment device. And
What kind of device?
I'm sorry?
What kind of device?
It's for ACL and MCL knee injuries. It's a leg straightening device. I'm co-founder of that organization.
Do you manufacture them or do you just wrap them?
Well, that's the neat thing, is it's actually manufactured in Salem, and my partner, who's a longtime Oregonian, so it's a local Oregon product, and so we subcontract out the manufacturing.
Okay. So you're doing that.
Mhm.
Is this your first run for office?
No, I ran in 2020, received the Republican nomination for State Attorney General, did very well, received almost 1 million votes, did extremely well in Multnomah County, got about 15% more votes than my predecessor before me, a great man named Daniel Crow, who received the Republican nomination in 2016. And I only got about 40,000 votes less than Kim Thatcher, who was pursuing the Secretary of State, had full backing of the party, a lot of money behind her campaign. I had neither.
So I've got to ask you, you're not a college graduate, you're not a lawyer.
Right, that's one of my best qualities, is I'm not admitted to practice before the bar. But much like the captain of a ship doesn't necessarily need to know all the inner workings of the engine room going on. He just needs to know where to steer the ship. And presently, I think that we're way off course in Oregon, and the Oregon that I know and love, we're rapidly, vanishing before our very eyes.
But most captains, to use your metaphor, ship's captains have to do a lot of training, and they have to be licensed. They have to know how to drive the ship. So, let's be honest, you're not a lawyer. How on earth would we put you in charge of 380 lawyers at the Department of Justice?
Right. So, if credentials were like the cat's meow, and that was always required, and certainly Ellen Rosenblum would have cinched that. She's got pretty good credentials, 3 terms as Attorney General, but yet she had some fundamental things wrong, in my view. I've never heard of an elected person working for another elected person. In another newspaper editorial endorsement interview, she stated that I am the governor's lawyer. I work for the governor. And, that's a big deal if you're an attorney. It's at least you could possibly get disbarred if you don't have it straight on who your client is. As I said, I don't know of any elected person that works for another elected person. She works for the people of Oregon. That's not the executive branch of government. And that seems to be a lot of lawyers have that incorrect.
I'm just a little bit unclear. You could have run for any office.
Right.
And yet you chose to run for an office that, at least on paper, you're not qualified for. So I'm just curious, why?
Well, that's not true. If I wasn't qualified, the Secretary of State wouldn't have admitted my candidacy.
Well, no, but in terms of your experience, it's going to be pretty hard for you.
No, quite the contrary.
Well, it's quite the contrary to you. What I'm telling you, which you don't have to believe, is that when you stack your experience up against a prosecutor with X years prosecuting crimes, Oregonians who've got an IQ above 80 are going to look and say, he's got more experience. Now, I understand you believe it's not relevant, but if you really wanted to win a race, why would you pick the Attorney General's race? Why not Secretary of State? Is there something specific about the function of the AG's office that has you interested?
Well, I think that, and this is also based on my very good performance last run, I think that if the Oregon we know and love is rapidly fading before our eyes, and I have a solution to the homeless crisis, actually, which is based on my business knowledge and experience, that the Attorney General role is the best to turn the ship around, so to speak, and to fix things that are going wrong in Oregon. I'm appalled that, for instance, let's look at non-unanimous jury verdicts. Oregon and Louisiana were the last two states doing that, clearly from Jim Crow era laws, and we continued to do so until the federal courts made us stop. And then if you fast forward now to a couple of years ago, the COVID closures destroyed many businesses, many people committed suicide even, caused a lot of depression, et cetera, businesses failed. And long and short of it is, we all ended up getting COVID anyway. Kate Brown, against the law, I believe the statute's clear, you're allowed 14 days closure and you can extend it for another 14-day term. Aside from that, she would need to seek legislative approval in order to continue to be closed, which she failed to do. Now that's a huge decision. I wouldn't want any one person making that decision.
Gotcha.
I'm sure you would agree with me there.
So I understand now why you've chosen to run for AG, despite your lack of a law degree. Will, he claims that the AG is not the governor's lawyer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think technically that is correct. The AG is elected to the people and it's responsive to the people. It's a democratic position, but by statute, there's certain instances or certain functions where the AG is supposed to serve the office of the governor. So it's partially correct.
And so can you talk about why you're running for a seat that won't allow you to put bad people in jail the way your career has allowed you to do for the last couple of decades?
Yeah. It's maybe mincing words, but I like to say that I protected people more than putting bad people in jail.
I'm sorry.
You're right, though. So to answer your question, so the Attorney General's office is really a seminal law enforcement public protection position in the state. It plays a very big role in the tangible and intangible public safety results that we're experiencing. One of those things is that the Attorney General's office is in charge of running point on all organized crime in the state of Oregon, including human trafficking, drug trafficking, organized retail theft, fencing, racketeering, and those are things that are wildly out of control. There's never been more disjointed.
So you must have a lot of experience and can speak to how helpful the AG's office has been to local district attorneys' offices in the last 12 years when it comes to these matters of organized crime.
I think so.
So go ahead, speak to it. Has the office not been doing
Yeah.
a job at fighting organized crime?
Yeah, so I think that for any success that our current Attorney General has had, one of those has not been criminal justice. I think the criminal justice division has been largely static in a time where crime and lawlessness has grown out of control.
Mm-hmm.
That's a division that's been demoralized and been completely disconnected from the district attorneys, the sheriffs, and the chiefs of police across the state. And so drug trafficking is organized crime, and we have a foreign drug cartel in our state. That's how drugs get here, and they're making millions of dollars off of exploiting addiction and crushing families and communities. And they're really organized, but we're not organized, and we're not organized because.
So what would you do as AG to take on the cartels that
Yeah, I
the
mean,
incumbent is not doing?
I've already started meeting with every sheriff, and I'm starting to meet with the district attorneys across the state, because day one we need to get law enforcement leaders in the same room, build a collective strategy, start information sharing, and start pushing resources to the places where they're needed most, because drug trafficking is what is really rotting our state, and it's.
Could you be
it's
more specific?
more specific?
Yeah, I mean, the Attorney General has visited with most district attorneys across the state.
Yeah.
So, she is having those conversations, but obviously she's falling down on the job and not busting the cartels. So
Yeah.
what could be done? Because, agreed, Southern Oregon is lawless, right?
So it's not hypothetical to me. This is what I was just doing in Ghana. Human trafficking is an international crime. I brought the Ghanaian government together. That includes their police, their prosecutors, and their social welfare. I brought together the U.S. Embassy and the State Department, and build a collective strategy. And we saw great success when everybody's.
But I'm just wondering if you can point that you're gonna hire 50 new lawyers in the Criminal Justice Division of the Attorney General's,
No.
or you're gonna seek change in law, making it easier for you to prosecute, or can you point to anything specifically other than a desire that you will do as AG that will demonstrate a change in the policy towards organized crime?
The Attorney General's office has doubled in budget in the last 10 years. It's not a resource problem. It's an execution problem. Law enforcement is execution. Law creation, we don't have a problem creating laws in Oregon. We have a problem enforcing them, and that's what I'm good at. And so what the current Attorney General has not been strong at is understanding how to execute that position of authority to make sure that laws are enforced across the state.
So when we look at the staff of the office currently, they got about 380 lawyers. 5% of them are in the criminal section.
You're talking about just the criminal division, or are you
Yeah.
talking about also with the criminal appeals? division?
Criminal appeals are basically
Yeah.
just backing up DA cases, right? So I'm talking about
People who are actually,
Mike Slausson's criminal section.
And I think you have another, it's quite a large number of attorneys that are also in the child dependency and child advocacy, and,
Sure.
and all of those things
But those
together.
are not what you're talking about.
They're involved.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
you're talking about organized crime. That's different from going after deadbeat dads.
Well, it's the deadbeat dads is child support. So I'm talking about child dependency and child advocacy cases where children are trapped in largely homes of addiction. We've really failed those children.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that we saw an attorney general candidate who was elected, John Kroger, come and talk about
Yeah,
being a crime fighter.
I remember him.
But the truth is, it's a very small part of the office's budget. It's a small part of their function.
Yeah.
A lot of what that office does is advise state agencies on statutory interpretation. So your voters pamphlet statement and your website are all about your criminal justice priorities, but
Yeah.
that's a very small part of the job.
Coming as an attorney general to change everything would be foolish. The attorney general's office does a lot of things really well, and it does a lot more than what you just. Largely it's about enforcement, charitable enforcement, antitrust enforcement, consumer protection enforcement. So there's an enforcement wing, whether you're talking about criminal justice enforcement. There's a common thread across, but the thing that people care about most and what's really crushing Oregonians right now is public safety. That's what's pulling and that's my background, and that's what's needed. So you call it 5%, and that's fine, but that 5% being broken is what is really killing the state. And if I might just
Sure.
add, one thing that I realized, maybe you guys would have realized it a long time before me, but in my time in Africa, being away from a functional criminal justice system, I realized that public safety is really the building block of any functional or good government. If people are not safe to go to schools, they won't go. If people are not safe to be on the road, they won't go. If people aren't safe to go to businesses, they won't go. And we're starting to experiencing that in something small, but that 5% is absolutely critical to getting Oregon back off its knees.
How many people reported to you when you had your largest staff?
I was around 80, I think it was 78 or 80 when I left Ghana.
How about you? How many people report to you now?
How many people what?
How many people report to you now?
Report to me now?
Or work in your company, however you want to characterize it?
I mean, maybe 20, 25.
What do those people do?
A lot of things. Public relations, various aspects of the manufacturing, sales.
What are the revenues?
Outreach.
What are the revenues of your company?
Those numbers. It's a private company. I'm not going to disclose those, but it seems to me that you folks are discounting me simply because I don't have a law license.
Well, we're
I think
trying
that's
to-
short-sighted. And
Do you think we're the only ones that are going to look at you and
well, the
say-
Oregonians don't seem to mind. I got almost 1 million votes, but the thing you don't understand is by so making that assumption, you're then saying that we have no good prosecutors in the Attorney General's office. We have no good investigators in the Attorney General, and that's simply not true. What we need is a fresh set of eyes with a guy that knows how to get things done. and
One of
that's
the
me.
criticisms of the current DA in Multnomah County, my guess is you don't support him, Mike Schmidt,
Correct.
is he's not a prosecutor.
Is he what?
He's not a prosecutor. He's never prosecuted a case. And so one of the hits against him, which my guess is you would probably agree, is this guy's supposed to be the leading crime fighter in Multnomah County.
I would investigate
He's
Mike
never-
Schmidt. I don't know that he's willing to investigate
That's not
Mike
my
Schmidt.
point. My point is, here's someone who's being criticized for not having relevant experience. So it's hard for you to say that no one can suggest.
I know when
that-
somebody's breaking the law. I'm versed enough in the law to know these things. And I mean, the simple fact is that we do need a fresh set of ideas. We've got a myriad of problems going on. We need fixers, not. Do you honestly think throwing another lawyer at the problem is going to solve it?
So Mike, give us an idea.
mean-
give us an idea of the skills that you bring. Tell us something difficult that you've achieved and how you achieved it.
Something difficult I achieved? Well, probably the most difficult thing I ever did was running the Flush Down Kate Brown, Recall Kate Brown campaign. And though we did not get enough signatures, we still received over 200,000 signatures in 90 days, and a record in Oregon that's never been broken, I might add. That's quite a monumental task, dealing 100% with volunteers and about $30,000 in our budget. So that was phenomenal and shocked many people. I turned them into the Secretary of State. They have them there if you want to check that out. But, we've got a lot of things. I mean, do you remember what happened with Glamour Salon down in Salem when she defied the governor's orders to lock down? Do you remember how Child Services was knocking on her door on some bogus claims that,
Can't remember that.
So the point is that these people will go after you.
Right.
I don't have a law license that I can go after. You were asking about how I would tackle organized crime. You go at it where it hurts them, okay? Fronts that are laundering money, that's one area where it hurts them. You you throw a wide net, okay, to catch these bad actors, and you do these things because it's naive for us to feel that elected officials at the Capitol are not influenced by organized crime. I think all of that's coming to light each day seems to bring more and more evidence of that. So again, I don't have a law license, that I don't have children that they can show up at the door and we need to investigate child abuse or whatever. I don't have a law license that they can threaten me with. If you start hitting them where it hurts, don't you think that they're going to push buttons where it will hurt this man if he gets elected?
Can you share with us any endorsements that you've received in this race from organizations?
Any endorsements I've received?
Yeah. Have any organizations endorsed you in this race?
Nothing comes to mind.
How about you? Well, any organizations have endorsed you?
Yes, sir. Crime Victims United has endorsed me, and a number of elected officials have endorsed me as well.
Give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, I think a majority of the sheriffs have endorsed me. Several district attorneys, former and current. I think about 40, 45 county commissioners. Laurie Chavez DeReamer, Greg Walden has endorsed me. Christine Drazen has endorsed me. Yeah.
But I haven't asked for any endorsements either, because sometimes there comes strings with those endorsements.
Well, you know,
I'm
the role of
beholden to
politics, if you can't take money from someone and turn around and screw them, then you shouldn't be in politics anyways.
I'm beholden to no one.
So
That's
maybe
one of
you're
the.
miscast. Well, can you, other than criminal justice, are there any other areas where you want to offer your criticism of the incumbent and how she hasn't done her job?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's probably a few places that could, like anywhere, could be better. And one of those things is pretty critical, and that's child dependency cases. Around 2020, the Attorney General's office sort of pulled in all the child dependency cases from each state district attorney's office and centralized it. And I don't think that's worked out well at all. There's lots of cases of children being left in homes of addiction where parents overdose and babies are left for days at a time. And
So can you clarify this for me, because I'm
Yeah.
not sure. You're talking about a child. What do you mean when you say a child dependency?
Child dependency cases. So parents that are struggling to meet the basic needs of their children.
Right.
You know, DHS comes in.
Takes the kid away, maybe.
And the Attorney General's office plays a really big role in the legal proceeding that follows.
It used to be the DA's office,
Used to be held.
but they centralized that in Salem in the AG's office.
Yeah, I think it was 2019 or 2020. I was
And
in
in your mind, the consequence of that is what? That there are more kids who are being left with their parents that shouldn't?
There's not this local response. The state's attorneys are a long ways away from. You're talking about kids in counties 5 hours away, and I think that the state's attorneys have been postured more towards defending DHS's actions than doing what's in the best interest of the child.
Wasn't part of the issue that Oregon has historically had a very, very high rate of taking kids out of homes, and we've had a bigger percentage of kids in foster care than most states?
That was the claimed reason, yes.
And that wasn't working out very well. The kids were staying in foster care, getting abused, or
Yeah.
never coming out. So
Yeah, and so I guess the idea was that we would stop drug testing parents, and then we wouldn't, when you didn't drug test parents, you wouldn't have to take the kids out. You could leave them with their family. But when children grow up in a home of addiction, there's almost no more dangerous place for a child than living in a home of addiction or living in a quasi or homeless environment. They're 4 times more likely to be criminally mistreated, 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted. Very unlikely to ever go to college, and very unlikely and less likely to be literate or graduate from high school. So that decision is creating generational trauma that's going to lead to more generational poverty. And so we threw the baby out with the bathwater.
what other areas are you looking to improve the performance of the office?
I think that Oregon suffers from a single-party state right now, and one of the key functions of the Attorney General's office, so every state agency has multiple Department of Justice attorneys attached to it. One of their key functions is to make sure that those state agencies follow the law. Not to do their bidding or not to impose any political agenda on them, but just make sure that they're not doing more than the legislature has allowed them to do. And I think that line has slid significantly in the last decade. And I don't think it's a Republican versus Democrat issue, because I started my career and there's always been a Democrat AGs. I mean, the Attorney General's always been a Democrat since I've been a lawyer, but the last 2 AGs did a much better job of holding that line and separating the power.
You mean the prior to,
Yeah,
before? Rosenberg?
Myers and Kroger, yeah.
Can you give an example of an agency that you think the AG's office has been too focused on protecting the agency rather than?
I think it's across the board. I mean, I think the posture has now become that we will defend agency action rather than advise make sure agency behavior is actually legal.
But you don't.
So they're taking an advocacy role instead of just being an honest broker, you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Same question for you. What would you say the AG's office isn't doing or needs to do that we haven't touched on?
Well, I think that she doesn't have it straight on who her client is, and that's one thing.
We've touched on that. Anything else? You've already said that. What else haven't you said?
Well, she's not She's not following the law. I mean, that's a big one right there. I mean, at worst, it's tyranny. Okay, she's defending the governor. I mean, if that's what he thinks his role is, then change the name and put a different face. It's the same kind of role. Have you ever heard an elected person that works for another elected person? I haven't. So yes, the AG defends and prosecutes on behalf of the state. What is the state? The state is not the executive branch of government. We are the state. So the AG represents all of us in this room, and yet, so when it comes to a little bit of here and there for consumer protection finance, that doesn't go at the bigger issues, and it feeds the machine. And when I say it feeds the machine, I'm talking about forcing people that find themselves locking horns with some state agency to go out and hire a lawyer. Maybe it's just a plain language reading of what's going on, saying, oh, well, you don't need to spend $10,000, $20,000 retainer on a lawyer. This is not, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to bring to the Attorney General's office. If you've got a complaint with an agency or an employee of an agency and you feel like you're being given short shrift or something like that, I mean, that's what's been going on. And aside from all of that, I mean, I've got a very good solution to the homeless crisis. It's very similar to the CCC program 80 years ago, only the difference is we're bringing in private industry. So it's a public-private kind of partnership with partnering up with groups like Intel, Nike, Precision Cast Parts. The trades are screaming for trained people. It's about a 4-year program for each person. Maybe they could graduate sooner, but at the culmination of that, they're going to end up with cleaned up credit. Maybe they had to file bankruptcy when they went in, dealing with the addiction issue.
So I'm sorry, you're suggesting that we give jobs at Intel to people who are mentally ill on the streets?
Did you say mentally ill? Some of them are mentally ill. Maybe they can't work at Intel, but maybe there's something they can do at Intel, working in the mail room or sorting things, or who knows. But Garden Foundation's proven that we can give jobs to anybody. They're working in the recycling and the document shredding business. So that's where I come into play.
How does the Attorney General get involved in homelessness? What is the Attorney General's role in dealing with?
Well, and that's another, see, the thing is the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing expecting different results. So throwing another attorney, no offense to Will, but into that role, somebody that doesn't have a big business sense. I've got 4 decades of business experience that I bring, which is common sense solutions to sometimes complex problems. So, what I'm proposing, we would create a small town in Eastern Oregon and then move them out. It's no longer, you can't camp out in town. Okay, then you've got NA, AA, and Celebrate Recovery handling the addiction issues of things. Then you've also got them working with life management issues like conflict resolution, different things like that they may need help in. Maybe they have a lot of fines, their licenses is suspended, working with the various municipalities that they owe fines to, getting those possibly reduced. And basically at the end of it, working with their addictions and things like that, moving them into a vocation, cleaning up their credit simultaneously,
Yep.
And then they have a paycheck. They've got a verified income so that 2 or 3, 4 years down the road, they can qualify for a bank loan, buying a home that they may have even helped build. Plumbers, carpenters, electricians, those are high-paying jobs, and they're all looking for people.
So can we ask each of you to ask the other a question?
I'm sorry?
Ask Will a question, and then Will's going to ask you a question.
Okay, just any kind of question?
Here's an opportunity for you to ask him a question. If you don't want to ask, that's fine.
Okay, well, I fail to understand why you think that the role of AG represents the executive branch of government.
Yeah, so I don't know if I wasn't clear, so let me give another go at that. But the AG represents the state of Oregon, and it's elected by the people, it's responsive to the people. But part of the statutory framework of the Attorney General's role is to be at the service of the governor, by law.
At the what?
By law.
At
the service of the governor. So the governor can ask the AG or can command the AG to do certain functions, and the AG must do that.
That's where I think we disagree.
Well, isn't it outlined in statute?
It's the law.
So have you read that statute and you have a different
Could you send it to
interpretation?
me? I don't,
So if the governor gets sued, who do you think is going to represent the governor in court? If the governor gets sued, as the governor often does, who should represent the governor in court if not the attorney general?
Well, if it's in line with her official duties, of course, the AG's office.
Well, you just said that it can't happen.
That's not what I said. That's
Yeah,
not what
The
I
Attorney
said.
General should not represent the governor, because then the Attorney General is working for the governor.
If the governor is charged with a crime, the AG has to
No, the
defend her
governor-
as long as it's
the
acted
governor
within the
gets-
purview.
The governor gets sued
If she broke the
civilly.
law.
The governor gets sued civilly over matters that have nothing to do with
Okay,
crimes
okay.
all the time.
But
All
what
the
I'm,
time.
but what I'm talking about, what we've seen with the current administration, when she violated the law on the COVID closure, the AG didn't lift a finger and backed her up on it. Now that's a definition of tyranny, and it goes against the checks and balances how our founding fathers wanted to establish our state and our country.
Okay. Do you have a question for your
Yeah,
opponent?
maybe mine will be a little different, but I'd ask you, I think you've ran now for state office this is the third time. What do you enjoy about it? What have you kind of learned from the processes before? And what are things that you did in previous races that you wouldn't do again?
Well, I mean, it stems from me being in the military. I like to serve. I believe that each of us.
I'm sorry, you were in the Air Force, is that what you said?
Yes.
Where did you serve? Where did you serve?
When?
Where?
I was primarily stationed up in Alaska doing rescue work.
Okay. Go
So,
ahead.
and before that I was in the Boy Scouts. So, I mean, I bought into that whole thing. When you leave the campground, leave it cleaner than when you got there. These values that seem to be, bygone now and at this time. And I think that each of us has a role, and this is what has made our country great up until the last 50 years, is people contributing to make the nation a better nation, irrespective of any personal gain. And many politicians now, I would say 98% of them that go in, they're looking for personal gain and lining their own pockets. How come so many of them go into office, making, a net worth of less than $500,000, and after several years they're millionaires? How does this happen? I think this is a mistake. This is wrong. And this is why our country is declining across the board. So what I would do different, I mean, I rack my brain trying to think of why, you've got some of these companies, I've gone over some of your contributions, Pape, the heavy equipment stuff and some of these things. And it's like these companies that make a lot of money in this state, why they don't get it. Why they don't get it. I'm not getting these large contributions. But on the other hand, I'm glad I'm not getting these large contributions, because guess what? Then they're going to get treated like everybody else. And from the AG's role, isn't that the best position to
So
be in?
you don't
go
feel-
in?
so you don't-
Irrespective of any organized crime connections. I have no dog in the fight. If you broke the law, guess what? You're going to jail. We can prove a case.
Is there someone in politics, either in Oregon or nationally, who you look to and say, that's the kind of politician I'd like to be? Someone who's a role model?
That's tough. I mean, the only one I can really comes to mind, and I don't know that much of, would be Marjorie Taylor Greene. I like her courage.
That's helpful.
I don't know a lot of things that she's done, as I don't have time to follow, these people, and certainly nobody is my idol. We're all subject to failure, and we can all make mistakes.
So tell us, you said we can all make mistakes. Let's have each of you tell us something that you did, a mistake that you made. What was the mistake and what did you learn from it? Mike, I'll start with you.
Over what? Anything?
Anything. So, something should be something significant. Shouldn't be that you stepped on a bug and it made a mess on your shoe.
A mistake that I made? I'd have to think about it.
You haven't made
You want to go first?
You haven't made any, or?
No, I've made mistakes, but I can't say this one is the worst mistake.
Well, I'm not saying the worst. I'm saying that with something that would show voters, hey, here's a guy who's got life experience and he's learned from a mistake that he made. So Will, you want to take a crack?
I unfortunately am an experiential learner, so there's so many of those. But the thing that kind of stands
What
out.
would be one that would be relevant to your
Yeah.
performance as AG?
I think the thing that stands out most to me is when I first stepped into leadership in northern Uganda. I'm such a results-driven person, and I move fast, I talk fast, I act fast, and I didn't realize the difficulty of trying to lead a multinational office, a multicultural office with people with very different productivity culture, timeliness culture. And so I kind of came in there hard charging, much like I guess the typical American would do. And my first 2 or 3 months there was rocky for everybody, and I had to learn to survive. Yeah.
I would say I should be more patient. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten more patient.
Well, give us an example of where your impatience was costly.
I guess maybe trying for results too quickly, maybe having, being a bit impatient if you're not seeing the results you want right away.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be about it.
Well, did you ever work with Barry Moletsky?
No, sir.
Right? He was a doctor who was for years sort of the leading practitioner of aversion therapy for pedophiles in Oregon.
Okay. No, I'm not familiar with him. I'm sorry. If I have, I just don't recall.
I'm just wondering if you thought whether or not what he was doing was effective. I mean, he was doing the Clockwork Orange stuff,
Okay.
Oh,
wow.
tied to a penile with Sid McGrath.
Yeah, I mean, in my old job, when somebody was charged with pedophilia,
Yeah.
one of the things the defense attorneys would regularly give was a sexual evaluation where they kind of do these full disclosure polygraph, penile, polysomograph, and so I've seen those, but I don't know that person's name. I don't know much about
He
him.
was supposedly had the national reputation.
Okay.
But
I want to. You brought up pedophilia, and I want to. I want to bring up something that I don't know that.
while you're looking for that, while we're waiting, can you tell us who your largest campaign contribution is from?
Like in total or one single? You sort of shook your head to both. But
Well, yeah, I'd love to know how much money you've raised
yeah.
and who are your biggest
Yeah,
contributors.
my biggest contributor would be Dick Withnell, who's with Nell Auto in Salem.
Okay.
He's kind of a longtime community leader there that I knew from when I was on the board of a high school
And what's your
mentorship.
budget for the primary?
I think our budget spend for the primary is, I wish my campaign manager was here, but I think it's $60,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
I found it. Are you familiar with this symbol?
No, I'm not, sir.
So the FBI did a study on, so there's businesses involved with this human trafficking, and they use symbols so that others in the business will know that they're in the business. And so, I saw one at a mall, at the doorway to a mall. That's actually at a business here in Portland. I don't want to name the business. But what I'm saying is that
You're saying people who are in the human trafficking business
as it pertains to children, they use certain
they
symbols.
use certain symbols
The
to
FBI
tell other
said
people that they're pedophiles or they're in the human trafficking. And you're not familiar with this.
I've not
the
seen that.
FBI came out with the study, and they said that they use symbols, okay, so that they recognize each other. Now that's a local business, and I want to go after them. I'm not going to name the business; it doesn't matter. But
Based on what?
I want to investigate them.
Based
They
on
have
what?
some. I'm sorry.
Based on what? That sounds like.
Do you
kind
want to
of-
root out this or not? I mean,
Well, yeah, but you actually have to have some probable cause that a crime has been
Okay.
committed. Are you
Well, we
familiar
can
with the concept of
investigate.
probable cause?
we can investigate them. I would say that's probable cause,
Really?
based on the FBI's research.
Okay. That's pretty dangerous.
Well, I would think you would be all over this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's funny, but it's not. Okay,
Well,
I mean, really.
I mean, come on,
do we
come
want
on,
to
come
root
on.
it out, or are we just gonna?
You're gonna, come on. You
We're
can't
going
be
to root it
serious.
out, but that means we have to believe what you're saying because you see.
Don't
a
believe what
sign.
I'm saying. The FBI. I'll get you the FBI study if you want.
Please send that to us. Can you
All
tell
right,
us
I
how
will.
much money you've raised for this race or what your budget is?
I filed a thing where I'm not going to raise more than $3,500.
Are you
Declaration.
You filed a voter's pamphlet statement though?
Yes.
Okay. So you've done at least the minimum.
Yeah.
All right, we are out of time, unfortunately. We got another one coming up in 10 minutes. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
one last question that we ask every candidate for every office.
Is this the Columbo? One last thing.
Yes.
Yeah, the one last thing. So the question that we're asking every candidate this cycle is, if a movie were to be made about your life which actor would play you. We'll put you on the spot.
No wrong answer.
No wrong answer here. Everybody picks George Clooney for some reason.
I'm just gonna say Denzel Washington because that's what I want. But
Okay.
There you go. Cross that racial
I
barrier.
don't care.
Clint Eastwood.
All right.
There you go.
All right.
The young Clint Eastwood or the 92-year-old Clint Eastwood?
A little bit younger.
Yeah, okay. Gentlemen,
Things
thanks for coming.
get better with age, like wine, right?
There you go. There you go.